Picture constructing your life on trust, love, and loyalty, only to have it fall apart in front of your eyes. Kody Brown, the father of Sister Wives clan, believed he had it all worked out. He juggling 4 wives, a large home, and a family that the world's fans were in awe of and jealous of. But what if those you trust most, your very own wives, begin to withdraw, ignore your advice, and have ulterior motives? And what if those apologies that you thought were genuine turn out to be smoke and mirrors? Today we're going in-depth into the jaw-dropping tale of Kody Brown's family breaking apart, where trust is put to the limit, feelings are running high, and viewers are left dumbfounded. For years, Kody Brown has been under the limelight as the head of a polygamous family that goes against the mainstream. His life has been a tightrope walk, balancing the demands and feelings of Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn. Each of them has her own personality, expectations, and emotional demands, which Kody has struggled to juggle. Early episodes of Sister Wives introduced audiences to this intricate world, filled with love, humor, and even tension. But behind the cameras, the drama was more extreme than the public understood. The family initially appeared to be a smooth operating machine. Kody coordinated schedules, holidays, and family gatherings, constantly attempting to ensure that everyone was valued. He wasn't only a husband, but a father, mediator, and provider as well. His leadership was constantly tested, yet the Brown family looked impenetrable for years, weathering internal conflicts, outside criticism, and the legal waters of polygamy in America. But things started to move under the radar. Telling hints of tension began creeping into interactions that viewers might not have even noticed if they weren't absolutely vigilant. A quick sigh one moment, a reluctant reply another, and even small arguments began to suggest cracks in the surface. Kody, the self-appointed guardian of keeping his family together, started to see these cues. Though at first he attributed it to stress or misunderstandings, the situation was more dire than he knew. The arrival of what fans refer to as the new wives, the ones who came in later within the family unit, introduced another layer of complexity. Kody assumed they would fit into the family perfectly, servicing both him and the other wives, while dealing with the exclusive challenges of plural marriage. What he got was resistance. Their unwillingness to completely accept the roles anticipated of them introduced tension, uncertainty, and insidious conflict. The rejection was not explosive or loud initially. It was served in small portions, missed interactions, reticence during family conversations, and emotional disconnection that one couldn't help but notice. Viewers at home could tell that the equilibrium was proving difficult for Kody to sustain. Even the viewers who had been watching for years could see a difference in his behavior. He appeared more withdrawn, more brooding, and occasionally visibly drained. His own self-assurance as the family head, something that had been his trademark, was starting to erode. Compounding the situation, communication within the family also began to disintegrate. Kody tried sincere words and apologies every time there were disagreements, only to have them greeted with suspicion, or worse, passive defiance. It was clear that things weren't as easy as saying sorry. Meri's tear began stirring to as easy as saying sorry. Emotions had been pent up for months, and not all the wives were willing to forgive, leaving Kody in a delicate situation where words counted and missteps could make the chasm wider. Tension mounted as leaks of confidential conversations came to light. The public received a sneak peek into texts between Kody and his wives, indicating that some of the apologies were simulated or not genuine. Although private, the revelations undermined the genuineness of family exchanges. The effects were instant. Kody's motives became suspect. Trust was disrupted, and the dynamics in the family became the subject of public scrutiny. Meri, the initial wife, also appeared to be especially impacted by such changes. Her estrangement from Kody had increased over time, and the seeming disconnection with the newer wives fueled her frustrations. Janelle, never afraid to speak up, started articulating her issues more clearly, making it evident that Kody's way of doing things was no longer working to bring family harmony. Christine attempted to broker, but even her diplomatic abilities were tested by the increasing tension. Robyn, the newest wife, managed her own set of problems, juggling obligation, personal expectation, and the implicit burdens of being a family wife. Viewers at home could observe the tension in each interaction. Group conversations that once ran like a well-oiled machine now had an undertone of unease. Home dinners, holidays, and even simple conversations were moments of tension where feelings could erupt at any moment. Kody, the longtime pillar of the Brown family, now seemed fragile, trying to keep the family together through a whirlwind of rejection, misunderstanding, and media criticism. Perhaps the most potent element of this time was the way Kody's on-camera personality started to play against his off-camera reality. On camera, he was steady, providing solutions and trying to make up. Off camera, he struggled with uncertainty, frustration, and heartache. Appearance versus reality became a hallmark of this part of the Brown family saga. A reminder that even the strongest and most even-tempered are not above bouts of emotional pain. When those you rely most upon begin to back away, even a strong leader like Kody can crack. And the biggest shock came with leaks that showed some of the apologies weren't as sincere as they seemed, uncovering deeper fissures in the family makeup that fans hadn't anticipated. These were more than mere drama. They were an eye-opener, revealing that even decades of meticulous planning and strong leadership could be threatened by distance, uncertainty, and rejection. By the end of this first section, it's clear that Kody's journey is not just about managing multiple relationships. It's about navigating a delicate balance of trust, love, and perception, both within the family and in the public eye. The story of this unraveling sets the stage for what comes next, a chapter filled with emotional turbulence, tough decisions, and the challenge of rebuilding bonds that may never be the same. It's one thing to experience rejection, it's another to realize it may have been camouflaged behind a skillfully engineered veil the entire time. Kody Brown, whose strong hand used to rule his household, was now struggling with something much more disturbing than bickering or trivial disagreement. His newer wives, those he had hoped would accept his definition of family life, were presenting him with indications of resistance, emotional distance, and even gentle defiance. And to add insult to injury, leaked messages brought to light that certain apologies he had believed were not as genuine as they seemed. The fans found themselves wondering, was the Brown family going to ride out this raging tempest? Kody Brown's life, which had hitherto been characterized by stability, family gatherings, and a feeling of form, was starting to feel tenuous. The challenges weren't merely about coordinating schedules or resolving conflicts, they were about feelings, deep, intimate, and oftentimes concealed feelings that would not remain silent. The new wives, whom Kody had anticipated would be accepting and a part of the family without any hiccups, started showing signs that they were not entirely on board. Their behavior was subtle, but revealing protracted responses to texts, observable reluctance in conversations, and frequent withdrawal from family debate. What made the time particularly complex was that the remainder of the family started perceiving these changes as well. Meri and Janelle, the veteran wives, had years of learning the beat of Kody's governance and demands. They recognized the fine line that had to be walked to keep everything peaceful, and the interference of the newer wives angered them. Christine, ever the peacekeeper, attempted to bring about understanding, but even her efforts had their limitations. Robyn, the newest member of the family, battled her own inner turmoil, caught between devotion to Kody and wanting her freedom and autonomy in the house. The tension was akin to a pressure cooker. Kody, who had for so long been the steadying influence, started to exhibit signs of emotional burnout. His efforts to reach out, reassure, and mediate were met with varied results. Some wives participated willingly, ready to talk and sort things out. Others reacted grudgingly, setting a tone of uncertainty and apprehension. The erstwhile harmonious interactions were now interrupted by pauses, misunderstanding, and moments of overt frustration. Then the leaks happened. Private communications, meant to be kept secret, made their way into the public domain. Some of those messages intimated that apologies moments Kody believed were genuine, were perhaps scripted or false. To someone who had taken pride in being authentic and a leader, this was a devastating blow. The possibility that reconciliation could be fake, or that the emotional truth he counted on could be challenged, undermined the foundation of the family's dynamic. Fans responded instantaneously, posting opinions, theories, and hypotheses on social media. Some were sympathetic to Kody, acknowledging the sheer difficulty of navigating a plural family in the spotlight. Others were intolerant, recommending that he was doing it wrong or not empathetic enough toward the newer wives' point of view. The criticism put another level of pressure on him. and he had to both manage his family's feelings as well as public opinion. Through all of this, Kody's everyday life became more burdensome. The wives' meetings, children talks, and household responsibility coordination all had to be closely tended to. Every encounter was now fraught with the possibility of tension. Casual family gatherings were even trial runs in patience and diplomacy, as Kody carefully made sure no one felt ignored or neglected. Emotionally, the time was grueling. Kody, who had always carried on with a calm and authoritative demeanor, started showing vulnerability. There were moments when the audience would see him hesitate, think deeply, or go away for a little while to reconcile the increased complexity of his family life. It wasn't all about drama, it was about emotional work. The unseen labor needed to manage relationships through various households and personality. The impact of the leaks intensified the situation. Apologies that once brought a sense of closure now felt hollow or performative. Kody had to reassess his strategy, question assumptions, and rethink how he could rebuild trust. The situation highlighted a fundamental truth in a family this complex. Even minor acts of perceived dishonesty can have ripple effects far beyond the initial moment. Meri's response was particularly telling. As the senior wife, she had been married to Kody the longest, and had seen the family change over years. She complained about both the new wives and Kody, suggesting that some of the emotional issues might have been prevented with better communication and more assertive boundaries. Janelle, who was just as seasoned, spoke openly about her issue, sometimes making bald comments regarding the shifting dynamics and the necessity of accountability. Christine was the voice of reason and kept everybody reminded that understanding and empathy were important, while Robyn tried to get her own place in the midst of changing allegiances and emotional strain. As the weeks went by, it became clear that the family were in a period of transition. Old ways and conventional forms were being challenged. Kody had the delicate responsibility of living between authority and empathy, leadership and vulnerability. Every decision, every conversation, every effort at reconciliation had weight. The emotional landscape of the family was tenuous, and the danger of further fragmentation threatened constant. When apologies are called into question, trust begins to crumble. And for Kody, finding out that a few of them may not have been authentic was more than a letdown, it was a red flag. The very existence of his family, forged after decades of hard work, was being undermined in ways he hadn't quite prepared for. But even during this tense time, there were glimmers of hope. Kind words, quiet conversations, and genuine efforts at communication told viewers that reconciliation could still happen. The road ahead meant patience, candor, and a commitment to facing hard reality. Kody's saga in this chapter wasn't one of rejection alone. It was one of the complexity of trust, the challenge of leadership, and the ongoing effort it took to keep a family together under the weight of both internal and external forces. At the conclusion of this episode, the Brown family was at a turning. How Kody responded, how he interacted with each wife, and how he dealt with the leaks would determine the path that the family would take. The audience was left bracing themselves, waiting to see if love and trust could withstand the pressure, or if the cracks would turn into permanent. Imagine watching your family break apart before your very eyes, realizing that no matter how hard you try, some cracks may never mend. Kody Brown, who had always appeared unbreakable as the patriarch of the sister wives family, was now confronting emotional upheaval that had even the most die-hard fans worried. The dismissal by some of his newer wives, and the backlash of phony apology, brought about a storm that risked tearing the unity of a family that took decades to build. What do you do when the ones you trust the most begin to doubt your motives? And what do you do when the foundation that you've always depended on starts crumbling? By the time things were at their worst, during this chapter of the Brown family saga, the relationships between Kody's wives were becoming more complex. Fans who had followed the family through the years knew all about their triumphs and tribulations. But this was different. It wasn't simple arguing or misunderstanding. It was something more intimate, something more visceral, something that challenged Kody to his limits of leadership, patience, and emotional stamina. Meri, the initial wife, had always been a reserved observer, picking her moment. During this time, however, her frustration surfaced. Years of patience, emotional investment, and wading through the challenges of plural marriage had rendered her with little tolerance for inconsistency. She started voicing concerns regarding Kody's management of the newer wives, highlighting moments where she had felt boundaries overstepped or where communication had broken down. Her language was restrained but biting, warning Kody and audiences that she would no longer settle for shallow salutes. The second wife, Janelle, was even more vocal, practical in her approach and direct in her communication. She never shied away from speaking up during family gatherings. Her criticisms tended to be about the shape of the family and Kody's decisions as a leader. Although her intention was to keep the tension at times became bigger because her honesty picked out the places where Kody's approach was not dealing with underlying emotion. Christine, the perpetual peacemaker, attempted to smooth over disputes while validating both older and newer wives' emotions. She constantly reminded everyone that plural marriage needed patience, compassion, and compromise. But even her skills had their limit. When the new wives, particularly Robyn, started giving visible signs of withdrawal, Christine's peacemaking became more challenged. She was always juggling mixed emotions, listening so each wife could feel heard and attempting to uphold Kody's authority and confidence. Robyn's process during this period was especially fragile. As the newest wife, she needed to balance her own expectation, personal need, and devotion to Kody, coupled with fitting into an existing family system that had decades of collective. Her interactions tended to show the struggle between autonomy and the demands of belonging to a large, prominent family. She was occasionally hesitant to a point of misunderstanding, fueling the emotional fire already raging within the family. The private conversation leaks only mounted the tension. Kody had taken seriously the sincerity of the apologies and reconciliation message shared with his wives. When it was questioned, the very trust that he had banked on was in question. Now, every move, every word, and every look could be misinterpreted or questioned. To a man who had invested all those years in building loyalty and emotional bonding, this was an overwhelming obstacle. Audiences sitting at home were able to feel the emotional impact of such family conversation, once filled with laughter and pockets of disagreement, now had an underlying tension. Eyes would flick, voices would soften or rise suddenly, and even small remarks could provoke defensive response. Kody, the longtime center of the family, started displaying moments of vulnerability. He talked less, thinking more, pacing alone or stopping in mid-sentence to carefully choose his next words. This was a man charting the serious burden of leadership in a culture where feelings were mercurial and trust was tenuous. Emotionally, Kody's experience in this session is a reminder of a basic fact. Even people who seem strong and together are here. No amount of experience, strategy, or planning can protect one from the sting of rejection or the trauma of betrayal, no matter if it comes from loved ones. For Kody, it wasn't merely a question of coordinating calendars or refereeing conflict. It was one of comprehending emotion, verifying feelings, and facing the possibility that some relationships would never be the same. The tension also spilled over into the way the family projected themselves in public. Cameras captured instances that were fans interesting, relatable, and sometimes poignant. Emotional moments of silence, sighs, and pauses were as revealing as fights or confrontations. These brief glimpses of personal struggle enabled viewers to relate to Kody and his wives and comprehend the magnitude of challenges he encountered. It was a stark reminder that managing multiple relations, each with its own complexity, is far from easy, especially when combined with public scrutiny. Often, the most difficult struggles are the ones that take place behind closed doors. For Kody Brown, those internal battles were every bit as strong, and sometimes more agonizing, than any showdown in public. The emotional estrangement from a few of his wives and the discovery of insincere apologies presented a leadership and patience test that would shape this era of the Brown family narrative. Even amid the accumulating obstacles, there were sparks of hope, small gestures of empathy, personal exchanges, and instances of forgiveness reminded Kody and television audiences that healing was within reach, though not necessarily easy. It became apparent that the process wasn't merely fixing fractured moments. It was about learning, evolving, and recognizing that loyalty and trust had to be constantly tended to. At the conclusion of this session, viewers were left with an intimate sense of the volatile emotional terrain Kody was forced to traverse. The juggling act of maintaining authority, empathy, and personal vulnerability created a picture of a family in transformation, a family in which each choice was significant, each discussion was important, and each feeling had the ability to shape the direction of relationships. Kody's leadership was being challenged as never before, and the results were by no means clear. When public opinion and private reality converge, even the most iron-willed leaders crack. Kody Brown, father of sister wives, and long considered the rock holding his complicated family together, had been mistaken in this supposition. The tension of rejection, emotional disconnection, and insincere apologies was finally catching up with him in a way that appearances no longer served to conceal. What occurs when your family suffers in silence? Love and loyalty are called into question, and every action you take is questioned. Kody's experience at this time is a chilling reminder that even decades of know-how and experience can be shaken by the unpredictable nature of family dynamics. By now, Kody's world was a precarious dance balancing on the precipice of chaos. The Brown family, once to be admired for its cohesion and togetherness in the face of the complexities of polygamy, was now exposing underlying conflicts that unsettled both viewers and members of the family. Even everyday interactions, such as casual conversations and family sessions, had import and fallout. Kody's attempts at keeping the peace had to involve vigilance, emotional nuance, and most crucially, a desire to meet the painful new realities head-on. The private message leaks had rocked the family dynamic. What were intended as authentic apologies, moments meant to mend misunderstandings or hurt feelings, were now being called into question. Some turned out to be performative or shallow, leaving Kody to tread the tricky space of restoring trust while dealing with the public's expanding interest. For a man who had always given a premium to honesty and fidelity, this was not just a personal test, it was an attack on the bedrock of his family leadership. His wife's reactions mirrored the intricacy of the situation. Meri, who had always demonstrated her emotional grievances, grew more assertive. Years of finding her way through the family dynamics had taught her keen insight into patterns, and she wasn't afraid to call out instances where she felt Kody's leadership or the newer wife's actions were lacking. Her assertive but measured viewpoint pushed hard conversations, challenging Kody to address uncomfortable realities about the family he had worked so diligently to sustain. Practical and blunt as always, Janelle remained the one who continued to make hard statements, at times escalating tension. Her admonitions, aimed at preserving family form and harmony, touched upon places where emotional work and conversation had failed. Christine, the peacekeeper, worked non-stop to mediate between points of view, offering explanation and validation to Kody and to the wives. Her efforts were vital, but even her tact and diplomacy were strained as arguments continued, and feelings were strong. Robyn's situation was still complex. She was the newest wife and was figuring out her sense of loyalty, personal autonomy, and integration into the family. The emotional tug-of-war between her independence and the demands of the Brown family created levels of tension that Kody had to navigate with sensitivity. Each overture, each apology or talk, took gentle deliberation and timing. A wrong move could increase tensions or solidify misunderstandings. Kody himself showed the human face of leadership more explicitly than ever before. The tension, emotional exhaustion, and perpetual juggling act were seen in moments of introspection caught on film. He walked alone, sat silently through contentious negotiations, and at times seemed literally burdened by the duty of holding the family together. This weakness was understandable, reminding audiences that even the strongest of individuals can be weakened by the strains of loyalty, trust, and leadership within emotionally charged situations. Public scrutiny added to the complexity. The Brown family had always been under the public eye, and every interaction, conversation, and family gathering was observed by their fans. The leaked messages fueled the fire, setting up debates, speculation, and divided opinion. Some supporters felt sympathetic towards Kody, appreciating the enormous task of managing a polygamist family while being fair, transparent, and emotionally grounded. Others faulted his move, questioning whether his shows of control or reconciliations had really solved underlying problems. The glare of publicity brought its own special brand of pressure, exaggerating tensions that may have been contained more quietly within a less public environment. In the midst of all this stress, Kody's strategy changed. He started prioritizing listening to speaking, watching to directing, and comprehension to judging. The self-awareness that leadership in a polygamous family was just as much about emotional intelligence as it was about logistical control started to become more apparent. Kody had to establish trust, not just in what he said, but in what he did consistently as well, showing that sincerity and compassion could lead the family back into harmony. At other times, the best lessons are learned through hardship. For Kody, the blend of rejection, emotional distance, and public criticism compelled him to re-examine his methods in relationships, apologizing, and leadership within the family. The stakes were higher than ever before, and every choice weighed significantly. In real-life terms, this was a time of frenetic discussion regarding expectations, limits, and roles in the family. Sessions that previously were ordinary became spaces for complaining, sorting out intentions, and negotiating for emotional territory. The Brown family, who had withstood decades of complexity, were now going through a shift, one in which trust, communication, and truth were the major currencies. Small moments of hope broke into the tension. Private words, sympathetic gestures, and honest admissions of errors reminded Kody and the wives that reconciliation was not out of the question. These moments, fleeting as they were, served as lifelines, reminding them that even broken relationships might find a way to heal if tackled with patience and candor. At the end of this session, it was clear that Kody's experience was about more than preserving family structure. It was about how to practice authority alongside empathy, leadership alongside vulnerability, and tradition alongside changing emotional needs. The struggles he was going through were a reflection of the intricate interplay among trust, loyalty, and personal development. Audiences in their homes were able to watch a man dedicated to upholding the ties of family, while recognizing that some breaks may take more than speech to mend. This session laid the foundation for what lay ahead: moments of insight, emotional confrontation, and potential transformation. Kody's tale in this chapter points to the fact that even in families established over decades, leadership, love, and trust need to be cultivated day after day, particularly when cracks develop and the world is watching. It was now painfully obvious Kody Brown's family life was no longer the smooth, harmonious home viewers had grown to love for so long. The rejections, insincere apologies, and undercurrents of tension had whipped up a storm that jeopardized the very basis of the Brown family. Picture the burden of being a leader, the emotional toll of attempting to keep a family intact while being under constant scrutiny, and the devastation of watching the ones you love the most drift away. This is the conclusion of a story that has left fans on the edge, where every decision counts, every interaction weighs heavily, and every second could forever alter the family. Kody Brown had dedicated years to building a family life that accommodated the personalities and needs of more than one wife, as well as caring for dozens of children among homes. But in this phase of the saga, he had a test unlike any other: a convergence of public pressure, strained relationships, and emotional burnout that left him and his wives in new territory. The newest wives, whose presence had originally brought energy, support, and enthusiasm to the family unit, had started to drift away. Their refusal to fully commit to their roles, either by subtle actions, avoided conversations, or withdrawal of emotions, caused tension that no apology nor mediation could easily diffuse. Kody's attempts at bridging the gaps were earnest, but even his most sincere words were occasionally received with reservation. The feeling that apologies had been faked only widened the emotional chasm, and Kody was left wondering how much trust had been lost in the family. Meri, the original wife, was still guarded. She had seen the family change over the decades, and had a deeper understanding of the complicated emotional dynamic than anyone. Though she still loved Kody, the pressure of managing persistent disagreements and perceived hypocrisy had been draining. Her answers were stern but clear, those of a woman who had come to a place where emotional integrity was necessary. She was not going to let them placate her with shallow solutions and demanded honesty, responsibility, and an open show of intention. Janelle, the second wife, also continued to give blunt criticism. Her down-to-earth and no-nonsense style sometimes escalated conflicts, but it also pinpointed areas that needed immediate attention. She reminded Kody that being a leader wasn't merely about keeping people in line. It was about actively cultivating emotional trust and stemming issues before they were too late to handle. Her criticisms, though hard to take, were necessary in encouraging reflection and awareness. Christine, always the peacemaker, was working overtime to keep things in balance. She attempted to reaffirm the feelings of each wife while trying to get Kody to understand all the family members' views. It was her presence that kept the tension from boiling over into full-blown conflict. Robyn, charting her own course in the family, felt she had inner struggles where she was stuck between loyalty, personal space, and the stress of fitting into a home with created dynamic. Public scrutiny only added to the dilemma. Each interaction, argument, or instance of tension was now witnessed by fans across the globe. Social media debate, internet speculation, and leaked messages put more pressure on Kody, making it harder to resolve disputes in private. The line between private turmoil and public image had been crossed, and Kody had to deal with both at the same time. In spite of the growing challenges, Kody showed resilience. He looked for ways to regain trust by walking his talk, honest talks, and being seen putting effort into knowing and supporting his wives. Even at instances of rejection and doubt, he upheld emotional honesty, knowing that it would take patience, time, and tact to regain faith and harmony. Small sparks of connection started to appear, whether with intimate conversations, shared experiences, or acts of empathy. Those moments kept reminding Kody and his wives that reconciliation was achievable. It wasn't immediate, nor was it straightforward, but glimpses of progress indicated the family's ability to heal. Oftentimes, the most impactful change occurs under the radar. A simple action, a sincere conversation, or a mutual moment of connection can start to restore ties believed to be severed. For Kody, these moments were lifelines in the maelstrom of family conflict and publicity. As the session continued, it was clear that Kody's journey was not only about mending relations, it was about facing the fact that leadership in a plural home involved emotional intelligence, humility, and the capacity to accept that there were things that could not be controlled. Trust, loyalty, and communication needed to be cultivated on an ongoing basis, and Kody's persistence was a lesson in patience and commitment. The emotional climax of this period revealed both vulnerability and hope. While some tensions remained unresolved, the family began to navigate ways to move forward. Kody's approach emphasized listening over directing, understanding over judging, and empathy over assertion. These shifts, subtle yet profound, illustrated his commitment to sustaining the family through its most challenging times. By the end of this tale, audience members could observe a family in transition. Kody's leadership, formerly characterized by control and order, was shifting towards one based on emotional connection and resilience. Although rejections and insincere apologies had left their marks, the consistent push to build trust and understanding back into their relationship indicated the strength and determination that had always been the heart of Kody Brown's story. Isn't one of family drama alone, it's one of determination, love, and the strength it takes to face hard realities. No matter how much rejection, doubt, and disintegration of what had felt invincible happens, there is always hope that understanding, patience, and earnest effort can mend even the most broken relations.